Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. So I haven't done a bass in a while, so this is going to be the next project, and the projects are piling up, so I'm going to try to do this in one episode. This is a Rogue bass. It's nothing special, but I got it for a good price, and I'm going to go ahead and clean it up, take these stickers off. It's got a broken nut. It's got all kinds of loose parts. And we're going to redo the electronics, or at least tighten these things up, and hopefully we can make it rumble again. And speaking of rumbling, I've got a Fender Rumble bass amp, and we'll give that thing a good cleaning and check that thing out as well. First thing I'm going to do is take off the truss rod cover. Alright, now that truss rod cover is off, I'm just going to verify the truss rod functions, then I can take the strings off and we can get deeper into this. So the truss rod nut does turn. Here's a quick shot of that broken nut. You'll see this a lot on instruments, just a little corner that's left of the nut after the E string breaks off. Sometimes it happens on this end, but that's a pretty common break, and I'm just going to replace it with a bone nut blank. Well, you gotta love surprises. I took the strings off and realized I've got a broken tuner post, so we're going to do a tuner replacement too. Next thing I'm going to do is just clean this thing up. Well, this thing has a level of filth I haven't seen in a while, so I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to clean up some of these metal parts. I'm going to oil the neck and come back when this thing is in a much more pleasant state. Alright, so this is probably a pretty drastic difference from the last time that you saw it. I'm going to go ahead and take the nut off right now and get ready for a nut replacement. So I just got a block of wood and a hammer, and I just put it up against the nut, and I'm going to tap it back, and these things come off with almost no effort. So I've taken the back cover off here, and I'm looking at the electronics, and I was able to tighten up the nuts on the existing pots. They are mini pots, but there's not a lot of space in here, so I just left them. The other thing that I'm going to do is upgrade this jack. It's not really necessary to upgrade it. It's just that this one is missing a little bit of the hardware, and it's really cheap anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and upgrade it to a full-size Switchcraft jack. Alright, I think I'll tie up some of this wiring and then I'll be all done in here. I can probably put the knobs back on the front too, now that I've fixed the pots. Alright, that's much better. Now these fit tight and they don't wobble. Now I won't cover nut replacement completely, but what I will do is talk about how I actually go about replacing this nut. And if you have any questions about nut replacement, replacing a nut on a bass is really no different than replacing a nut on a guitar, and I have a video about replacing a nut on a guitar available, so go search for that. I believe I covered that in my review of the Music Nomad nut files, which are the nut files that I used on this project. Now when swapping in a bone nut blank, all I did was cut it to width, which means I held it up to the neck, marked where I needed to cut it on one side, cut it with a handsaw, sanded it smooth, tested it for fit, and then glued it in place. All you do to glue it in place is put a drop of super glue on both sides of the bottom and then clamp it down with a set of spring clamps. To mark your string locations, you simply hold an old nut up against the back of the new nut and transfer the locations of the strings with a pencil. Then take a medium file, mark the locations of the strings with the file, basically replacing the pencil marks you just made, and you have the suggestions of string slots that you'll need to actually begin slotting your nut like you would any other replacement nut. So there are only a couple of steps extra in replacing a nut with a blank, but it's just about as easy as any other more expensive nut that you might buy off of Amazon. Now I've gone ahead and filed the string slots into this one, and they're basically roughed in at this point. They're not quite all the way as deep as they should be, but they're very close. To file these slots without strings in place, you can begin your filing on each string, place a straight edge from the nut down to the 2nd fret, and then measure with a feeler gauge how much space is between the straight edge and the 1st fret. And if you shoot for about a 5/1000 feeler gauge there, 5/1000 of an inch, you'll come out about right. I'll fine tune that later once I actually get the strings on. Now, as you know, I discovered a broken tuning post when I was replacing the old tuners. So I've got a brand new set of Fleor tuners that I'm going to be installing They look exactly like the old tuners. Alright, there really wasn't much to that job, so I'm done with the tuners and now we'll move on to strings. To finish the nut installation, we've got to install strings, so that's the next step. And I'm going to be using a set of these David Ellefson SIT strings. So Megadeth all the way. I finished getting the strings on, and once I did that, I went ahead and fine-tuned the nut, so I've got about 18 thousandths between the first fret and the strings here. One thing I will say, if you're filing a nut, finalizing it with the strings in place like this, you want to make sure your action is close to correct. Especially on a really long string like this, small changes in action can make a big difference. I set the action on this bass to 6/64 at the 17th fret, which is the spec for a Fender bass. And if you want to, you can go check out my video on how to properly set up a Fender jazz bass. And it has a lot of these string measurements and action and height measurements, things like that. Another thing I checked was neck relief, and that involves putting a capo at the first fret and then fretting the bass at the 17th, measuring the height of the string at the 8th, and you should be at about 10 thousandths on that. And at this point, that's where things are. I've got the neck relief set, the nuts fine-tuned, and the saddle is fine-tuned, but I haven't done the intonation yet, so that's what I'm working on right now. Intonation's pretty simple. All you do is tune the harmonic at the 12th fret to the right pitch, then fret the note and compare the fretted pitch to the harmonic pitch. And if the fretted pitch is sharp, then you tighten the saddle screw. If it's flat, then you loosen the saddle screw. Well, I was struggling there a little bit with adjusting these screws, and it's really because the springs that are on these screws don't provide enough pressure against the saddle to move it in a lot of cases, so you end up having to sort of mash in on the screw with the screwdriver. Then the saddles will sometimes rub against each other, so you adjust one saddle and then you affect the one next to it. So you saw I was kind of going out of order probably, but that's how things go. But at this point it's completely intonated and it sounds good. I just need to check the action again now that I'm done with intonation. Well, that still looks pretty good. There are some grooves in the bridge here that I didn't know if I got out of on a couple of these saddles, but I guess I must still be in the realm of adjustability. If I had needed to adjust the saddle height here, it's just a matter of getting out an Allen wrench and adjusting the saddle screws. Okay, well, the last thing that I've got to address is pickup height. Fender's spec for a P-bass pickup is 7/64 from the strings. Of course, that's with the strings fretted at the last fret, so let's go ahead and adjust that. These things need to come out a lot. Okay, I've got these things close, but I've got sort of a weak spring under this pickup here, so it's a little wobbly. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can take care of that. Okay, well, this had some extra pickup springs underneath it, but I removed those and I added some high density foam weather stripping under the pickup, and that helps give some springiness and support the pickup, so it does both the action of a pickup spring and sort of a stabilizer at the same time. Okay, I'm done with the bass and I've made all my adjustments. Everything seems to be working right, but I haven't heard it yet. And I was thinking, well, I could play this through my Bassman, but I also picked up this Fender Rumble 15, and it's 15 watts of carpeted goodness, and I just thought, well, you know what, I'll go ahead and add this to the episode as well. So the only problem with it is it's pretty clean on the outside, and that's thanks to me doing a lot of vacuum and actually a little bit of trimming with a hair trimmer. I got all the fuzz off of it and it's looking good, and there's no more cat hair in it. It just still has a little bit of a scratchiness to the pots. So I've already taken the back off. It's got a pretty tiny little 8-inch speaker in here, and I went ahead and removed the power wires from the back here. They're just spade terminals that plug into the connector back here, and I would recommend, if you're doing this, go ahead and label which one of the colors went where. But I think to get the head out of this thing, I still need to disconnect the speaker wire and remove about 4 screws from the top. So let's do that now. Okay, to clean up this head, I'm just going to spray a little bit of contact cleaner into the pots. There's an access hole in each of them at the very top. So I'm going to spray that into there, rotate the pots around, and then that should clear up any scratchiness that we have. While you're in here, it's a good idea just to inspect for any burnt parts or any other things that might be wrong with the amp. I don't see any evidence of wear in this one at all. Okay, I'm going to give the amp one more cleaning with the vacuum and then we'll try this thing out. It's a really simple amp. It's just got a volume control and an EQ, and it's got bass, middle, and treble, and then plus or minus settings on either side of a 0 that actually has a detent in the knob to hold it at 0. So that's kind of interesting. It's got a CD in, a headphone in, and that's about it. So let's just give it a quick little test to make sure that my fixes worked. Yeah, no scratchiness in the pots. Yeah, sounds pretty good. Let's just check for some rattles or something. Well, I have to say it sounds pretty good for its size. I know 15-watt bass amps aren't really cool or anything, but you know, it's got a little 8-inch speaker and there's nothing wrong with it. It's very portable. Okay folks, well that's going to wrap up this episode for this little combo here. It's going to make some little bass player really happy, and it's a cool bedroom practice setup. Thanks again for hanging out with me. I appreciate all the likes, all the comments. Thanks for visiting my Amazon links that actually do support me at no extra cost to you. Please make sure you subscribe to see future episodes, and I'll see you next time.